Hi guys, we're going to get started today on our last math lesson for this week. So we're using your worksheet 14.5. Looks like this, has the clock on it. You can go ahead and work on getting that out and getting your name on it. And I'm going to do a little recap from yesterday. So yesterday we started talking about the clock. We started talking about the numbers on the clock. And so we were just we were figuring out that there were numbers 1 all the way to 12. You guys did some filling in the missing numbers, circling the numbers on the clock. We talked a little bit about the two hands on the clock. So we have the short red hand on my clock that represents the hour. We have a long blue hand that represents the minute. And today we're going to take it just a little bit farther and we're going to talk about telling time to the hour. But before we do that, we're going to do a little recap about what is this called. When we look at the very front of a clock, what do we call it? Do you remember from yesterday? The face of the clock. That's right. So this is the face of the clock, and on the face we have hands. Some clocks have 3 hands. This one has 2. But the hands help us tell the time on the clock. Now, one fun fact that I did not tell you yesterday was that you see these other numbers going around my clock? Those help me count the minutes on my clock. But this big 60 is what we need to pay attention to today. So the 60 tells me that if I were right up here at the 60, this clock, when it starts moving and it goes tick, 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 it's moving. Every one of these dots represents a minute. And so there are 60 minutes in an hour. It takes my hand, it has to move 60 ticks around this clock before it gets to a new hour. So, for example, if my clock was if the hour was on the 4 and the big hand was up here at the 60, anytime this big hand is hitting on the 12, we say o'clock. Can you echo that? O'clock. That's right. So this time shows me the hour is on the 4. So I would say 4 o'clock. Good job. Now, my minute hand has to click all the way around this clock, but watch that hour. Oh, it's creeping. It's creeping. It's moving slowly. Now look. The hour moved to 5 because it went 60 minutes around the clock. And so now my clock shows 5 o'clock. Good job. So today what we're going to be working on is that skill exactly. We are telling time to the hour. So every time that we're going to talk about today is o'clock. It's going to be 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, because the big hand is always going to be pointing to the 12. That's a new hour has come. So on your paper today, at the very bottom, they put a number in there, but they want us to trace it. But we're not going to do that just yet. We're going to figure and think, what would Miss Freeman's clock need to look like to show 3 o'clock? Well, we just said this hand has to stay here, right? But we need the hour hand to be on the number 3. So I'm actually going to move it this direction to get it back to number 3. And I've got to put this back on the 12. So now my clock says the hour's pointing to the 3. So it says 3 o'clock. And I'm pointing that big hand to the 12. Now, the next one, we have to draw the hands on your clock on your paper. So we're going to go ahead and trace that number 3 at the bottom of the page. And then we're going to write the number 9 over there next to it at the bottom. So where your other space is, you're going to write the number 9. So my paper looks like this. I've got number 3, and then I've got number 9. Now, on your clock, you don't have hands on your clock yet. So we have to figure out how are we going to show 9 o'clock. Well, we need the hour to point to the 9. So which one's the hour hand? Remember, the short one, right? So we're going to make this one go all the way to the number 9. So I'm going to make mine go around 60 minutes in an hour, and it's going to stop at the 12 to say o'clock. So now my clock is pointing to the 9, and my big hand is pointing to the 12. This is what we're going to draw on your clock. So you're going to make a short hand coming from the middle, and remember, just like yesterday, doesn't have to be perfect. Just try your best. A short hand pointing to the 9, and your long hand pointing up to the 12. So here's Miss Freeman's. I've got my short hand to the 9 and my tall hand to the 12. And that time says 9 o'clock. Now, your interactive clock that you worked with yesterday is attached again today. So after we finish this math lesson, maybe your parents could say, for you to show on your clock 3 o'clock. And you're going to know that I have to put the short hand on the 3, right? I got to make that short hand go all the way to the 3 and that minute hand on the 12. What if I wanted to show 5 o'clock? Short hand to the 5 because it's the hour. 5, and then my big hand on the 12. That would say 5 o'clock. Let's do one more before we flip over. What about 7 o'clock? What would I have to do? That's right. I'm going to take my hour hand, and I need it to go to the 7 because it's telling me 7 o'clock, and I'm up to the 12 to show that time. So on the back of your paper, they did number 1 and number 2 for us, okay? So number 1, the hour hand is pointing to the 2. So you're going to trace that number 2. And the minute hand is pointing to the number 12, and that's showing me o'clock. So you're going to add that to your clock now. And you're going to do the same thing on number 2. It's pointing to the 9. The little hand, the blue hand, is pointing to the 9. So you're going to add that 9. And the big hand is pointing to the 12. So that shows you that that number says that time is 9 o'clock. Now, number 3. They didn't do it for me. I've got to look. It shows me that the little hand, the blue hand, is the one we're looking at. What's the blue hand pointing to? That's right. It's pointing to number 11. Big hand's on the 12, so it stays o'clock. So 11 is what I'm going to write on number 3. Look at number 4. Where is the little hand pointing to? That would be the blue hand on your clock. Very good. It's pointing to the number 7. Big hand is still up at 12, so that clock says 7 o'clock. I'm going to hold up my paper so that you can check your answers. So I've got 2 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and 7 o'clock. Good job. What about number 5? Where is that hand pointing to? The blue hand. Excellent. It's pointing to the number 4. Is that minute hand changing? No. It's staying on number 12, and that tells me it's to the hour. It's saying 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. So every time it's up there on that 12, I know it's the next hour. Oh, don't let number 6 fool you. Look very, very closely. Both hands are pointing to the 12. So what would that say? Remember, I start with the blue hand. That tells me the hour. So blue tells me it's 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock. 7. Oh, the blue hand moved over just a little bit. It's pointing to the number 1. So that time would say 1 o'clock. And look at number 8. The blue hand is pointing to the number 6. So that tells me that the blue hand tells me the hour. That's what I say first. 6. And then the minute hand, the red one's pointing to the 12. So I know that it's 6 o'clock. Good job, kindergarten. I'm going to hold up my paper so you can double check. We had 4 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, and 6 o'clock. Now, I only say o'clock when my clock is pointing up to the 12. That's the only time I get to say that. So let's say that Miss Freeman's clock was pointing over here. This does not say 7 o'clock. This is a different time that we'll work on a little bit later. So the only time I get to say o'clock is when it's starting a new hour. Now, let's do a little pop quiz. How many minutes are in an hour? Do you remember? Remember this number up at the top? It tells me this goes around one little dot all the way around to number 60. There are 60 minutes in an hour. So it takes my clock 6 ticks around, 60 minutes to get around that clock. I also wanted to tell you guys, because you're using that interactive clock, which is really, really cool. So let's say if your parents are telling you, or grandma, whoever's helping you out, and they say, okay, I want you to show me on your clock 4 o'clock. So you take your little interactive hands on the clock and you know, oh, she said 4. I know I've got to make my red hand go all the way to the number 4. And I heard o'clock, so it's going to point to the 12. So you do this. Well, then remember there's that little show button, and it will show you what's called a digital time. So this is called an analog clock, which you guys heard in your song. The analog clock looks like this, but a lot of clocks that we have in our houses, on our phones, on our watches, they're all digital clocks. So Ms. Freeman wanted to share that little bit of knowledge with you today too. So let's say you put in 3 o'clock, okay? Let's just say, you might say that. Well, to look at that on a digital clock, they write 3, and then it has like a colon symbol, which is 2 dots stacked on top, and then 2 zeros. I hope you're going to be able to see my color. Or if they wrote 9 o'clock in a digital clock, it would look like this. So that will help you kind of know if you're right. So the o'clock, when you click that digital button, it should have a 00. That will show you that you did it correctly. So if I were showing on my clock, like I just showed you, 4 o'clock, when I click that show button on their digital clock, it'll say 4, and then it'll have those 2 dots on top, 00, and then I'll know that I was correct. So that is attached down below. You also have another TikTok around the clock with Jack Hartman. It's really fun to kind of review this skill. Parents, feel free to go back over this. I know that this video was a little bit longer. I probably went maybe a little faster than they were able to keep up. So you may go back. You can pause at any time in any of the videos. Please know that that is an option. If they seem confused, they have a face that's like, oh, I don't know. Stop, reiterate what I'm saying to them again to let them know what I'm trying to get across to them. And then especially going back over with them about the 60 minutes in an hour, that clock, that has to travel those 60 minutes before it gets to that new hour. Again, the focus today is just on o'clock to the hour. Don't stress about moving any forward, counting any more minutes. We'll get a little bit more into that next week. But the kindergarten focus is mostly to the hour. So keep that in mind as you move forward. And feel free to let me know how the interactive clock is working for you. Remember, if they were in the classroom, they would have one of these. And so it is really, really important that they get some sort of interaction with a real clock. And that's why I attached that interactive for them. Because if they were in the classroom, everything that I just did right here with them, saying, okay, can you go find 4 o'clock? They would be doing it on their clock and holding it up for me to kind of self-check. So you're kind of my self-check at home using the interactive clock, helping them navigate through that. Repetition is the key. So keeping that clock close by might be a good idea as we continue to move forward. If you guys have any questions or if you need anything from me, feel free to send me a comment or an email. I'll be happy to get back to you. You guys did awesome today. I hope you have fun with your songs and your link down below.